My name is Ethan Carter and I'm 32 years old. I live in a quiet tree-lined suburb just outside Kansas City, Missouri. And by most measures, I'm a pretty ordinary man. My job as a data analyst is stable, if not thrilling. I'm not the kind of person who commands attention in a room, and my evenings are typically a simple cycle of dinner. Maybe a basketball game on TV or a few chapters of a book before turning in. It's a life without much fanfare. For the past 5 years, this small house has been my sanctuary. My neighbors and I exchanged friendly waves and smiles, but our interactions rarely go deeper than that. I've always appreciated the quiet predictability of it all. Or at least I thought I did until everything changed a few days ago. Living directly next door is Emily Harper. She's 36 with a kind of classic understated beauty, warm blue eyes, and an air of quiet composure. She was married to James, a man who looked to be in his late 40s, always impeccably dressed. We'd shared polite greetings across our lawns over the years, but I never truly knew them. They were a private couple. James always seemed to be in a rush, a man with places to be and people to see, projecting an aura of importance. Emily, in contrast, possessed a calm presence that lingered with you even after a brief 30-second exchange about the weather. Last Tuesday, I saw her sitting on her front steps. It was dusk and the street lights were just beginning to flicker on. She wasn't crying, but she was staring at nothing. Her shoulders slumped, looking smaller and more lost than I had ever seen her. The polished facade she and James always presented had a visible crack in it. I watched her from my window for a few minutes, an internal debate raging inside me. I'm not one to intrude, but something about her profound stillness pulled at me. Finally, I walked outside, crossed the small patch of grass between our houses, and stopped a few feet away. I cleared my throat softly. "You look like you need a friend," I said, the words feeling both inadequate and necessary. She looked up, her eyes holding a deep exhaustion I hadn't seen before, and her voice was barely a whisper when she replied, "I do. More than you know." Of course, I invited her in. I led her to the couch and put a kettle on for tea, moving with a sense of purpose to fill the fragile silence. I didn't probe with questions. I sensed she would speak when she was ready. She sat with her hands clasped in her lap, her gaze fixed on the delicate curl of steam rising from the mug I placed in front of her. After a long, quiet stretch, her voice finally broke the stillness. "It's too quiet in there," she murmured, nodding toward her own house. "I thought I could handle it, but I just don't want to be alone right now." I simply nodded, telling her she didn't need to offer any explanation. We just sat there for a while, the warmth of the tea mugs in our hands, allowing the silence to settle around us. It wasn't an uncomfortable quiet. It felt strangely peaceful, a shared moment of calm. After a while, she began to talk about James. She spoke about how their life together wasn't what it seemed from the outside. How over the last few years, an immense distance had grown between them. She described feeling more like a piece of his curated life than his wife. Her voice was steady without tears, as if she were carefully letting long-held truths seep out like water finding its way through a fissure in a dam. She met my eyes and said, "I know this must sound terrible, but a part of me feels like I've already grieved this. It's like I lost him as a person long before he walked out the door this morning." I didn't have the right words, so I offered very few, just a nod and my undivided attention. It seemed to be exactly what she needed. Before she went back to her house, she glanced around my living room, a faint sad smile touching her lips. "It feels warm in here," she commented softly. And then she was gone, returning to the cavernous quiet of her own home. But in that short time, something had shifted for both of us. The next morning, I found it impossible to focus. There were emails piling up, data sets to analyze, and a report with a deadline looming at the end of the week. But my thoughts kept circling back to Emily. I could see her so clearly sitting on my couch, clutching that mug of tea as if it were an anchor in a storm. I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but the raw, unvarnished honesty in her voice had worked its way under my skin. Not in an intrusive way, but it had left a permanent mark. By lunchtime, I realized I hadn't eaten a thing. I was staring blankly at the same spreadsheet for what must have been 15 minutes when I heard another knock. I opened the door and she was there again. This time there was no pretense of composure. She wore no makeup, just a pair of jeans and a faded gray sweatshirt that seemed to swallow her small frame as if she'd been living in it for days. In her hands, she held 2 brown paper bags from a local deli a few blocks away. "I had a feeling you might forget to eat," she said, managing a slight smile. "I almost did, too. I thought I'd bring lunch if that's okay." She didn't wait for my response, just stepped inside as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And for some reason, it felt completely right. We made our way to the small patio out back. The sky was a uniform, heavy gray, but the air felt cool and clean. She passed me a roast beef on rye, and we both sat there quietly unwrapping our sandwiches. We didn't say anything at first, and I didn't try to force conversation. She took small, deliberate bites, her eyes fixed on the line of oak trees at the back of my yard, looking as though her mind was a million miles away. Eventually, she was the one to break the silence. "It's so strange," she began, her voice low and thoughtful. "I thought I would feel completely shattered, you know? I imagined I'd wake up sobbing or screaming or just something, but mostly I just feel hollow, like I'm walking through the scenery of someone else's life." I glanced over at her, but she didn't turn to meet my gaze. Her focus remained on the trees. "I've had this weight on my chest for so long, Ethan. Even when James was still here, it feels like the morning started years ago. Back when things between us began to change, when we stopped really looking at each other." I let her words hang in the air, giving her the space to continue without interruption. I just sat and listened. She let out a long, slow sigh. "We used to be so close. I truly loved him, but his career became everything. He traveled constantly, came home later and later and talked less and less. I started eating my dinners alone, even on the nights he was physically in the house. We shared a bed, but there might as well have been a continent between us." She finally turned to face me, her eyes a little glossy, but her gaze unwavering. "Have you ever had that feeling? Like you're slowly becoming invisible in your own home?" I nodded, not because I'd experienced that exact situation, but because I understood the profound loneliness she was describing. I think everyone understands it in their own way. A moment passed and then she let out a soft, almost self-conscious laugh. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to unload all of this on you. I didn't have anyone else to talk to." "You don't ever have to apologize for that," I said. "Sometimes you just need someone to sit with you in the quiet." She gave me a look that was a mixture of gratitude and perhaps a little surprise. For the next hour, our conversation shifted. We didn't talk about James anymore or about the end of her marriage. We talked about small, simple things, terrible movies we secretly loved, our favorite coffee shops in the city, the time she adopted a stray cat that vanished a week later. I told her about the time I accidentally sent a company-wide email with a typo in the subject line that read public announcement, and she laughed. It was a real unrestrained laugh. And for that brief moment, she looked like a person who still had joy accessible to her. At one point, I felt the back of her hand brush against mine on the small patio table. It rested there for a single charged second, just long enough for the contact to register with both of us before she gently pulled it away. Her expression shifted. A flicker of something, maybe guilt or just confusion, crossing her face. "I should probably go," she said abruptly, pushing her chair back and standing. "This is all. It's probably too soon. I don't want you to think I'm just using you as some kind of emotional crutch." I stood up as well. "You're not," I said, and I meant it completely. She paused at the door. "I just really didn't want to be alone today." I nodded. "Then don't be. Anytime you need to talk or just not talk, my door's open." There was a certain weight in the silence that followed, as if we were both aware that something was happening between us, but neither of us was ready to name it. We could both feel it, a shift, a warmth, a connection that neither of us had been looking for. She gave a slow nod. "Thank you, Ethan." "Really?" Then she stepped outside and walked across the lawn back to her house. I watched her go, her arms crossed over her chest as a light breeze caught her hair. Something had definitely changed. I couldn't articulate it, but I knew we had crossed some invisible threshold. Nothing physical had happened. No embrace, no kiss, but an unspoken understanding had taken root between us, and I had a feeling it wasn't going to just fade away. The following day began quietly. It was a cloudy morning, the air hanging low and heavy with the promise of rain. I sat at my kitchen table, a lukewarm cup of coffee cradled in my hands, attempting to sort through a backlog of emails. But the words on the screen wouldn't cohere. My mind kept drifting, circling back to Emily. It wasn't just that she had come over again. It was the feeling her presence left behind. Her words, her vulnerability stayed with me long after she had gone. I couldn't shake the image of her looking at me with that complex mix of loss and a strange emerging familiarity. And then there was that moment, just the briefest brush of our hands on the patio table, but it had imprinted itself on my memory like something much more significant. Sometime after lunch, I found myself at the window overlooking her backyard. I told myself I wasn't looking for her, but my eyes scanned the property anyway. And there she was, standing near the edge of her porch, her arms wrapped tightly around her torso, as if she were trying to hold herself together. She looked so small against the backdrop of the large empty house, so uncertain, like someone standing on the precipice of a decision they weren't sure they should make. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and then the knock came. I knew it would be her before I even turned the handle. Emily stood on my doorstep in a navy blue sweater that hung slightly off one shoulder and a pair of simple black leggings. No makeup, no jewelry, just her. She looked utterly exhausted, but her eyes held a quiet intensity, the look of someone who had been wrestling with their thoughts for hours. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yeah, of course," I said, stepping aside without a second thought. She walked past me and into the living room, just as she had the day before, but her movements were slower this time, more hesitant, as if she were questioning her own right to be there. I didn't rush her. I just stood for a moment, watching as she scanned the room as though it might hold some kind of answer for her. "I wasn't planning on coming over," she said after a moment. "I've been pacing back and forth for the last hour, but I didn't know where else to go." "You don't need a reason," I told her gently. Emily moved toward the couch and sat down, curling into one corner of it, making herself small. I took the armchair across from her, giving her space. The room was quiet for a bit, filled only with the distant hum of traffic and the steady ticking of the old clock on my wall. "I don't know how to be alone," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I went from my parents' house straight to living with James. That's all I've ever known. There was always someone else there. Now it's just me." I nodded slowly. "That's a hard adjustment." She let out a shaky breath. "The thing is, I felt alone for a long time, even before he left. It's like I was mourning the end of our marriage before it was even officially over." Her words were heavy with the truth she had likely held inside for years, and I could tell it cost her something to say them aloud. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "That kind of loneliness is its own special kind of brutal," I said. "It's different when someone is there physically, but emotionally they're miles away." She looked at me then, her gaze direct and searching. Her voice dropped even lower. "Do you think it's wrong that I don't feel guilty for being here? I don't feel guilty talking to you like this so soon after everything." I took a moment before answering, wanting to choose my words with care. "No," I said finally. "I don't think there's a rule book or a clock for grief or connection. Sometimes people come into our lives exactly when we need them the most. That doesn't make it wrong." Her eyes softened, a visible wave of relief washing over her face, as if she'd been holding her breath, waiting for my judgment. "I just didn't expect to feel drawn to someone right now," she whispered. "Neither did I." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "I don't want to go back to that house tonight. Not because I'm trying to run away from it, but because I can't bear to sit in that silence again. I feel like I'm going to suffocate." I could hear the genuine panic in her voice. It wasn't melodrama. It was the sound of a woman who had reached the absolute limit of what she could endure on her own. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. "If you need a place to just breathe, I can make up the guest room." Emily blinked rapidly, fighting back tears that had suddenly welled in her eyes. I didn't expect you to say that. You're not alone in this, Emily. She nodded slowly, and for the first time that day, the faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. Later that evening, I pulled clean sheets from the linen closet and made up the bed in the spare room while she sat in the living room, sipping a cup of chamomile tea I'd made for her. We didn't talk much more. The silence between us felt natural now, even comforting. Before she turned in for the night, she approached me again with no drama or urgency, just a quiet sense of closeness. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly. "For this, for not asking too many questions, for making me feel like a person again." Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't a romantic gesture, nor was it rushed. It was simply human. Her head rested against my shoulder, and I held her with both arms, offering a steady and calm embrace. It was the kind of hug that settles deep in your bones, one you don't easily forget. When we finally let go, she whispered, "Good night," and disappeared down the hall into the guest room. I stood there for a long moment alone in the quiet of my house, the warmth of her touch still lingering on my shoulders. And for the first time in a very long while, I realized something fundamental in my own quiet life had changed. I didn't sleep much that night, not because anything had happened. It hadn't, but because I was acutely aware of her presence. I was aware that Emily was just down the hall, aware of the immense weight she was carrying and aware that this was more than just a neighbor needing a place to crash. This was a woman whose entire world had just been upended, who, for reasons she might not even fully grasp yet, had chosen to seek refuge in my home. The walls of my house felt thinner. Every creak of the floorboard seemed amplified, and my thoughts refused to stop spinning. I kept replaying the hug in my mind. It wasn't passionate or dramatic. It was just deeply, honestly human, the kind of embrace you don't forget. Not because of what it might imply for the future, but because of how profoundly necessary it felt in the moment. When the sky finally began to lighten from black to a soft gray, I slipped out of bed. The house was completely still. I moved quietly, not wanting to wake her. I brewed a pot of coffee and stood by the kitchen window, holding the warm mug in both hands, watching the first gentle light of morning spill over the backyard fence. About 20 minutes later, I heard the soft, cautious sound of her footsteps in the hallway, as if she were unsure if she was intruding. She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a light gray blanket from the guest room. Her hair was tasseled from sleep, her expression calm, but tired. She was still beautiful, but in a different way now, more raw, more real. "Morning," she said quietly. "Hey," I replied with a small smile. "I made coffee." She nodded, stepped into the kitchen, and accepted the mug I offered her. We stood there for a while without speaking, just sipping our coffee. There was something about that shared silence. It wasn't awkward in the slightest. It was restful. Eventually, she sat down at the kitchen table, pulling the blanket more snugly around her shoulders. She stared out the window for a long moment before saying, "I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." I sat in the chair across from her. "I don't think you're supposed to, Emily. You're just figuring it out 1 minute at a time. Right now, that's more than enough." She nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about how it felt yesterday just sitting here talking, breathing. It felt like I got a tiny piece of myself back." Then she looked directly at me. Her eyes held something new. Not romance, not confusion, just a profound depth. "James and I, we weren't really a couple anymore. We lived in the same house. We shared a life on paper, but emotionally we were two strangers occupying the same space. And I didn't even realize how completely empty I'd become until I walked out of that house. I just listened. I didn't interrupt. I could tell she needed to articulate this, to give voice to the feelings she'd kept locked away. "I came here yesterday because I couldn't stand the silence anymore," she continued. "And now I don't want to go back. Not yet." She stayed the entire day. We didn't make a formal plan. Her presence just became a natural part of the day's rhythm. I made us scrambled eggs and toast for a late breakfast. She helped me sort my laundry, and she laughed when she discovered a single bright pink sock that had somehow infiltrated my load of whites. At one point, we went for a walk around the neighborhood, taking a slow, casual loop under the gray sky. We didn't hold hands, but our arms brushed against each other a few times. A small contact that went unmentioned, but was felt by us both. The day unfolded gently without pressure. That evening I cooked dinner for us. A simple pasta with a fresh salad. Afterward, we ended up on the couch in the living room. She tucked her legs up beneath her, holding a fresh cup of tea in both hands. I sat beside her, maintaining a small but comfortable space between us. A nature documentary was playing on the television, but neither of us was really watching it. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "It's strange. I feel a sense of peace here, like I'm allowed to just exist. I haven't felt that in so long." I turned to look at her. "You don't have to rush anything. There's no script for this." She looked up, her eyes searching mine for something. Maybe permission or just understanding. "Do you think it's wrong that I don't feel bad about being here?" She asked again, the question still weighing on her. "No," I said softly. "I think you're doing what you need to do to survive. That's never wrong." Her head slowly leaned against my shoulder. I let her rest there, my arm finding its way around her, not in a forceful or suggestive way, but just to offer a steady presence. And then, in the quiet of the room, something shifted. She looked up at me, our faces closer than they had ever been. Her gaze lingered on my lips for a moment. I could feel the warmth of her breath, and then slowly, tentatively, she leaned in. Her lips met mine softly, carefully, like a question she wasn't entirely sure she should be asking. We kissed just once. It wasn't a kiss of passion or fireworks. It was a kiss of pure connection. Two people trying to feel something other than pain. She pulled back slightly. "I'm sorry. You don't have to be," I replied, my voice quiet. We didn't kiss again. She leaned into me once more, this time resting her head against my chest. And we stayed like that for what felt like an hour, quiet and still. Something had changed irrevocably, and neither of us wanted to break the spell by speaking it aloud. I don't think I understood at the time how deep the connection between us had already grown. In the beginning, we were just two people trying to navigate the circumstances we had been handed. But as the days turned into a week, something about the simplicity of our shared moments, those morning coffees, the quiet evenings, the easy companionship began to feel like something more, something real and substantial. It wasn't a sudden or dramatic transformation. It was a gradual evolution that began after that quiet night when Emily had stayed over and we had shared that one hesitant kiss. A question neither of us was ready to answer. We didn't rush into anything afterward. In fact, following that night, we both took a step back, retreating to our own spaces. We both needed time to think, to process what was happening between us. But the space didn't feel awkward. It felt necessary and natural. Neither of us was in a position to dive head first into something new. We both understood the need to move at our own pace. For the next few days, Emily stayed in her own house. She told me she wasn't ready to abandon it, and I understood completely. She needed to face it, to clean it out, to sort through the physical remnants of a life that was no longer hers. But she came over to my house every day. Sometimes for coffee in the morning, sometimes for a quiet conversation in the afternoon. The pain of her separation was still there, a heavy presence in her heart, but a sense of quiet companionship was steadily growing between us, one that didn't require grand gestures or sweeping declarations. I'd have the coffee ready when she knocked and we sit on my couch, sipping it in comfortable silence or sharing our thoughts. Sometimes she would cry, letting out the waves of sadness as they came. Other times she would laugh at something silly I said, like the time I spilled coffee all over the table and my frantic attempt to clean it up with a paper towel only succeeded in spreading the mess further. I found myself smiling more than I had in years. Something about her presence was slowly, steadily bringing me back to life. And in turn, I could see she was changing too. Her eyes, which had been so full of sorrow, began to hold a different light. She started to smile more, even if it was just a little at first. Her laughter, when it came, was freer, less hesitant. She started talking about things she had forgotten she loved, hobbies and interests that had been set aside during her marriage. I was watching her find herself again piece by piece. It wasn't a fast or easy process, But with each day we spent together, I could see she was healing. Not completely, that kind of emotional wound doesn't work like that. But she was learning to live with the scar. As time went on, I realized that in helping her, I was learning how to do the same for myself. Learning how to open up my own quiet, predictable life. Then one Saturday about a month later, she invited me to her house for dinner. I hadn't set foot inside since this all began, and I felt a knot of nerves tighten in my stomach as I walked across the lawn. Her house, after all, was the epicenter of it all. The place where she had felt so invisible. The place her husband had walked out of forever. But she was the one who had invited me, and this time it felt different. It felt like a deliberate step forward. I brought a bottle of wine. She had cooked a simple dinner, a light pasta dish that felt like comfort on a plate. We ate outside on her back patio as the sun dipped below the horizon. The evening air was cool and pleasant. The kind of evening that invites you to sit back and simply enjoy the stillness of the world. We didn't talk much during the meal. We didn't have to. The conversation flowed easily as if we had been sharing dinners like this for years. There was no pressure, no expectation, just the soft clinking of our forks against the plates, the quiet hum of the neighborhood settling in for the night, and the occasional shared glance when one of us said something that made the other smile. As the night stretched on, the sky darkened to a deep indigo and the soft light from the patio lamps cast a gentle glow around us. That's when she looked at me and her expression was different from any I had seen before. It wasn't sadness in her eyes anymore, nor was it uncertainty. It was something steady, something sure. "I think I'm ready," she said, her voice clear in the quiet of the evening. "Ready for what?" I asked, unsure of where she was going. "Ready to let myself move forward. I've been stuck for so long, Ethan, and I didn't know how to get out of it. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can. Not because you saved me, but because you helped me see that it's okay to move on. That I don't have to be defined by what I lost." Her words hit me with a force I hadn't anticipated. I didn't say anything at first. I just reached across the table and took her hand in mine. Felt right, completely natural. I didn't need to say anything. She knew I understood, and I knew she understood me. She smiled then, a real open smile that reached her eyes, and I realized just how far she had come. This was no longer just about her recovering from the past. It was about her building something new, something unexpected, but something undeniably good. "I don't need to rush into anything," she continued, her thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. "But when I picture a future, you're in it, and that means something to me." It was my turn to smile, a little nervously this time. "I don't need to rush either," I said softly. "We can take it as slow as we need to. But I want to be there with you, Emily. I think we both deserve that." The silence that followed wasn't heavy or awkward. It was full of a quiet, shared understanding. There were no more questions, just a mutual certainty that whatever came next, we would face it together. From that night on, things were different. We didn't suddenly fall into a whirlwind romance. We didn't need that. We took our time. We still spent our quiet mornings together and our long evenings just talking or doing simple things around our homes. We enjoyed the profound comfort of companionship. And as the days and weeks passed, we found ourselves leaning on each other more and more. We didn't rush, but slowly, inevitably, we both came to realize that we had found something real, something worth holding on to. A few months later, after countless shared dinners and quiet nights, I found myself waking up next to her every morning. It wasn't the loud, chaotic kind of love you read about in novels or see in movies. It was the kind that felt steady and true, built not on grand gestures, but on the accumulation of thousands of small, quiet moments of shared support and understanding. I was happy, truly happy, and so was she. And that's how I knew this was the right kind of ending, or rather the right kind of beginning. The kind where two people found a way to move forward. Not by forgetting the past, but by refusing to let it define them. And just like that, it wasn't a story about loneliness anymore. It was a story about healing and about the quiet, beautiful surprise of a second chance.